Hi, welcome to a new episode in the Internet Surfer, hosting the most horror and creepiest stories from Reddit. Please don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy.
Customers of restaurants that's appeared on Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares. What was the food actually like before and after the show helped the restaurant? Episode 2.
In 2013 or 2012 my wife and I went to The Secret Garden in Moorpark, California, not knowing it had previously been on Kitchen Nightmares. We had a hankering for some French food, and it came up as an option in the Google search. It turns out that his has since closed. We were initially waited on by a female server, and then waited on by the owner/chef. In hindsight there didn't appear to be anyone but those two working, and tried a few of his suggestions off the menu including the escargot. The owner definitely had a creepy vibe to him that involved spending away too much time at our table making uncomfortable amounts of eye contact, mouth breathing very heavily, and bragging about all things himself and French cuisine related. After spending too much time at our table, he waddled off to the back. We received some wine from our server and proceeded to wait, and wait, and wait, and wait for our appetizer of escargot to crawl its way to our table. What we were expecting was the usual butter/garlic feast of snails in the special ceramic mini muffin-like plate. What we got was a bizarre arrangement of sautéed vegetables swimming in butter with a few snails hiding in their midst. Needless to say, not the best escargot we had ever had. I honestly don't remember what we ordered except that it took an inordinate amount of time to arrive at our table. While waiting for our meal, the owner came out to chat us up some more and awkwardly suggested that we check out his secret garden in the back of the restaurant. Our curiosity piqued by the fact that there was actually a secret garden and not simply a flowery restaurant name, we made our way out the side of the restaurant and down a sidewalk to the back. What we encountered was not impressive to say the least. The secret garden consisted of a plot of ground covered in astroturf with a covered banquet dining area, a corner dance floor, and random, unmatched pieces of lawn furniture and decor scattered throughout. A few strings of fairy lights and some shabby shrubs rounded out the experience. Despite being offered to be reseated out in this glorious area, we declined and instead elected to stay indoors. When our food arrived, it was mediocre. What I recall of it was mainly poor presentation and relatively bland flavors. During the course of the chef preparing our main course, he had returned to the bar to fill up his wine glass several times, so perhaps his attention to the preparation was lacking. However, a few weeks after eating there, we dug up the Kitchen Nightmares episode for the restaurant and were surprised to see that our experience was right in line with the pre-Ramsay cooking techniques.
I went to Amy's Baking Company in Scottsdale, Arizona after the episode aired. I was there on a business trip and thinking, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see how crazy these people really are. On my last day there, I decided to have lunch at noon, like a normal person. Nope, they're closed. Well, my plane leaves at 6 p.m. I can try to have dinner or something there before I go. I get there at 4:30 p.m., and I see they're open. I walk in and immediately see Amy and Sammy sitting off to the side looking at their phones. They look up. They are the only two people inside. I'm alone, with these mutters. So, this is how I end. My heart drops into my stomach. Hey, are you guys open? Sammy hops up and smiles, gesturing to a table. Yes, of course. He leaves me to a table, all smiles and charm. Can I get you anything to drink? Coffee? Tea? My wife makes an excellent vanilla bean vodka. Would you like some cake? He keeps babbling. I'm overwhelmed. I never thought I'd say this, but I look over at Amy for relief. She's also all smiles. I ask for some of the vodka, because who wouldn't right now, and go up to look at the cakes after Sammy leaves to get the drink. I realize I have to play dumb, or I will be eaten alive. You make all of these? They look great. I asked Amy. She starts babbling about her dreams of being a cook and how she makes all of them, bullshit, and how she just finished her cookbook and would I like to look at it. I act impressed. The cookbook is 75% fluff. I thought this would be the best souvenir I could possibly bring back. As I'm looking through it, gagging at the $40 price tag on the book, she starts talking about her 4 babies. She gets her phone and starts showing me her Instagram that has cat pictures. Oh, here's one of his birthdays. It's a cat picture with a little party hat painted on it like it's from MS Paint. I die a little inside. Eventually, my vanilla bean vodka arrives, and it takes all of my reserves to not chug it. I asked for some of the overpriced chocolate cake and told her I'll take the cookbook, but only if she autographs it. She happily obliges. I finish my pretty good but not $8 good piece of cake and honestly really good vodka with them hovering over me. Do you want something more to eat? More vodka? More cat pictures? I might have made that last one up. Before I leave, I ask to take a picture with her. She obliges, a bit hesitant, with Sammy jumping up to take the picture. I figured I'd pushed it just as far as my ignorance would let me without them getting entirely suspicious of my real motives for being there. I say thank you, leave, and immediately call my husband to tell him what happened. My plane ride was pleasant, mostly, because I was tipsy thanks to the vodka. Would I go again? Hell no.
Black Pearl in NYC. Here is a review of it from the NYT in 2005. Okay, so, what do I say? We ate there before the Ramsay crew came through. Having spent many years in Maine, I knew 2 things, Moxie soda and seafood. We were staying in the area, and we felt like a quick bite to eat. We saw that, and knowing my penchant for seafood, we went in for a beer, a lobster roll, and some fun. The staff were courteous, but it was getting close to when Ramsay would come. You could see the manager was frayed and there weren't many people in the joint. The manager was basically running between all of the stations, grabbing cash, and watching everyone like a hawk. I think he thought that internal problems were to blame for his floundering business. So, was it the food? The food is good but not fantastic. People go to Boston and eat seafood at Legal Seafood or San Francisco and eat at Taddock Grill and get a really solid seafood. The seafood was good, but it was too Maine. See, true Mainers, you can't get there from Heya, Aya, eat seafood fairly straight up, no frills. Browned hot dog bun with lobster, a bit of mayo and maybe a drizzle of butter. Crinkle-cut pear French fries with a bit of salt. But that's for people who drink seawater. Most people don't want a real Maine seafood experience. They want a lobster roll with smoked paprika on a focaccia roll with aioli mayo. They want too many flavors. Black Pearl was simple, straightforward seafood that you'd eat at Palace Playland before jumping on the Sun Wheel. It was too simple, too straightforward, and too Maine. The thing is, he wasn't charging Maine prices. He was charging market NYC prices. The place was located between Avenue of the Americas and Broadway. For that kind of money? It was good, but I don't think it was going to blow anyone's skirt up. For someone who grew up with the sand beneath his feet eating from Houts in Camp Ellis and drinking lime rickeys from the soda fountain, it brought me right back. But it was too expensive and in an area with just too many food choices. But I want to call bullshit on Ramsay. Canadian lobster and Maine lobster are the same. Here is his bullshit rant. Lobsters caught all along the Atlantic coast are the same. Not only are the same species, but the currents that stretch from Massachusetts to Newfoundland are the exact same with roughly equal temperatures. Most professional chefs cannot tell any difference. The difference in price? Lobster landings in Atlantic Canada are higher than Maine lobster, see, Atlantic Canada and Maine. The Canadian dollar has been historically lower than the US dollar. Depending on your quota, size of boat, length of your trawls, rope, etc., you can fish for lobster well in excess of 25 fathoms, 200 feet, and I believe upwards of 450 feet, calling lobster fisher. I knew of a guy who would set out from southern Maine and fish off the NH and northern Mass coast. I knew of another who fished out of Eastport and Lubec, which is on the Canadian border. Lobster caught there are either or. Maple leaf or stars and stripes. Doesn't make a difference. What made me angry was that it was manufactured. Ramsay made the guy look like a deceptive person by selling Canadian lobster when the reality is, it's the same species, with a similar taste. A lot of Maine restaurants, including some big names in Boston, serve Nova Scotia caught lobsters. Why? They get a decent price for the same product and have a good relationship with those suppliers. I felt really bad for the owner because honestly, that's the kind of thing where it sounds really bad. You're selling me subpar Canadian lobster, when in reality, it's not a significant difference. A lot of people call Maine lobster anything hauled out of the ocean from Montauk to St. John's. It was a really deceptive, dirty trick and I think was unfair. If the former owner of Black Pearl is reading this, you were set up. I never watched another episode of Kitchen Nightmares after that because I realized he was making TV, not trying to educate people about food and food service.
I've been to Zocalo and Chiarella's, which are both in Philly. I was in graduate school at the time and my boyfriend, and I stumbled into Zocalo post-Kitchen Nightmares since it was close to our school, but we deliberately sought out Chiarella's out of curiosity. I think we discovered Kitchen Nightmares from a small sign in the front door of Zocalo about Gordon Ramsay's visit. I had been into Hell's Kitchen a few years before, but discovered KN thanks to that. Zocalo had awesome margaritas and some good appetizers. The food was fairly good, but for a Mexican restaurant, it lacked a little spice. Chiarella's food was actually really good, great pasta, dessert, and meat. I specifically love spaghetti and meatballs, even though I usually don't dig that stuff. I felt a little awkward going there since the family drama was pretty intense in that episode. We tried to get to the Hot Potato, a place that mostly served baked potatoes, but it closed before we could get there. My sister actually worked for a restaurant that was on Kitchen Nightmares. It was an Atlanta restaurant in Inman Park called Park's Edge. My boyfriend and I had been there before the show and the food was very underwhelming and the entire atmosphere was whacked. Big, bright colors, no host stand, weird layout, awful lighting. After, the business seemed to pick up. My sister said that the place was still floundering though, because the neighborhood had already decided that they didn't like the place. When their lease was up, a local institution, Victory Sandwich Bar via Decatur, put in a bid for the place. That was not an extremely hard decision for the landlord.
I visited here in April, completely by accident. It was late, had no idea it was on the show, and my experience was not very great. The owner was there, and he kept asking if we had seen his episode of the show and how he had been on TV or about his favorite ice cream place an hour away. He didn't stop talking to us for about 20 minutes and kept rambling on about whatever he could, and eventually it slipped that his wife had left him. I felt really bad for the guy because it seemed like he was just super lonely and all he had left was this restaurant. We had a pizza that night and it was really subpar. The toppings were sliding off the pizza and the crust reminded me more of a sapapilla. Definitely not Denver's best pizza. We went to Chiarella's shortly after KN, without knowing they had been on it. We just kind of stumbled on it through an app that got us 30% off. They were super eager to please when we were there to the point of being oppressive. Like, giving us tons of wine in the house, and when we didn't want our glasses refilled the owner was like, "What, now you don't want the wine? What's that about? You don't like it?" It was so awkward. Also, after every dish came out he would ask for critiques and they were crazy serious about it. That being said, the food was really good, and we did go back. I was better prepared to drink free wine the second time around and was not disappointed. Yeah, I grew up on the Maine coast in a big lobstering community. There are some differences between Canadian and Maine lobster, those being what time of the year it was fished. Maine is year-round, Canada is not, and, if Canadian, where in Canada it was fished, Canada has different lobstering areas, and water temperature does affect flavor to a degree. But when it comes to the point, Gordon was full of weird in that episode if he thinks the flavor will be significantly different between a Maine lobster and a Nova Scotia lobster. That being said, it's technically false advertising to say it's Maine lobster if it were sourced from Canada, even if a customer would absolutely never be able to tell the difference. Usually, Canadian lobster is advertised as Atlantic lobster, but that's variable. Not Kitchen Nightmares, but Restaurant Impossible, which is the same idea on Food Network. Bryant's Seafood World in Hueytown, Alabama used to be a fun family restaurant with all the fried seafood you could want in a blue-collar town. The new owner took it over and tried to fancy the menu up. Prices went up and food quality did not. As I said, this is also in a blue-collar town where the majority of the folks work at the steel mills. They don't particularly want fine cuisine. Robert Irvine came in and changed the decor, which needed to be updated, and added some fancy dishes to the menu, which wouldn't appeal to the majority of customers in the area. They kept the second owner's menu, as well, which, as I said, wasn't that great. The new food was okay, but it was out of the price range for many of the people that would eat there. Now, it sits empty and unoccupied like the steel mill that shut down last year. A couple bars in my hometown were featured on Bar Rescue. One of them, the show obviously edited, the bar did good business before the show and continued to do good business afterward. The other bar they featured was a weird show, disgusting, terrible sound setup for bands, weird policies, unsure staff. The show made it obvious the owner was a bit scummy. About a year after it aired, I had the honor of interacting with the owner professionally, and I have to say he was twice as bad in person as he was on the show. I think they edited his to make him look nicer. Before the show that bar was gross, but they had a fantastic location and a decent number of customers. The show gave them a makeover with a really strange, niche gimmick, and they closed down within 6 months due to a combination of bad publicity from the show and the weird new gimmick. I was in Nashville on Fat Tuesday and my wife and I were looking for an authentic Cajun meal and hopefully some good Zydeco to go along with it. I did some research and found this place called Chappie's on Church. Initially it was the background story that got me interested. It was a feel-good story of how the first restaurant in Mississippi was ruined by Hurricane Katrina and they decided to move to Nashville and start all over again. The reviews were mostly good, and they were even better than the old Chappie's in Mississippi, so we went. They did have live music, which was nice, it was overpriced, and the food wasn't terrible, just not memorable either. A year later and I saw the episode on TV, and I was disgusted to see how dirty this place really was. In my opinion, Chappie just didn't have the motivation to change and he blamed everything on Gordon and Kitchen Nightmares. I never went back, but the place soon closed after the show aired. Took my wife and kids to Luigi's in Anaheim, California about 5 years ago, Disneyland trip, and it was like a 5-minute drive from our hotel and from Disney. My wife and I are fairly fussy on Italian food, half my family are Italians, and even got an Uncle Vito with a restaurant of his own that doubles as a deli over in New Jersey. So, I went in there with high hopes, and you know what, I found a great little restaurant it seemed with friendly staff, but just okay food. It was a family Italian restaurant. It not a fine dining place, and honestly, I prefer that myself when I get Italian. Anyway, overall, the experience was extremely mediocre. I remember not liking my dish at all to where I only finished maybe a quarter of it and didn't even take any left to go. It just felt very average. It wasn't expensive so I didn't complain that much. Okay, So, Disneyland trip number 2 about 6 months ago, we are now back in Anaheim. My wife and I are both fans of the show, having burned through the seasons on Netflix, so when we remembered this restaurant being on the show, we had to check it out again. First, the look was not particularly different from what I remember, though we sat near the front door as it was decently busy, in a booth, and I didn't bother to wander around. Overall, facilities seemed well kept and clean though. For anyone that has been there, you walk in the front, and we were the first booth on the left, like opposite of the front desk. You could see them working in the kitchen from where we sat. Now, the food. For me, I'd say the food was great, above average, though my dish wasn't anything mind-blowing. It was good. However, my wife absolutely loved it, and she is actually the pickier eater. I can't remember what she got, but I do remember it was something with chicken. She let me try hers, and I do remember thinking, that's better than my dish, and I got something good with Italian sausage. I rarely get chicken, but I would have gotten that dish again. Prices were good too. Cheaper than you'd get from going to Olive Garden, and better food, bigger portions, though I guess you miss those bread sticks. LOL. I'll go again next time I hear that way. So, good for them. Yanni's Greek cuisine in Seattle. The food took forever to come out, was usually way too oily, and the menu was pages and pages long, me. The restaurant itself was very outdated as well. Before the episode we did not know Yanni's was family-owned and operated. The woman we knew as the host turned out to Mrs. Yanni. She was incredibly stressed and always apologetic. On the episode we saw Yanni placed high demands on himself and took it out on his wife and daughters. Gordon was a real psychologist during the episode and brought their family together. It was pretty impressive. The restaurant looks great, the food is very tasty, from a much shorter menu, though it is growing, and Mrs. Yanni has looked incredibly happy every time we've been since. Wonderful job, Gordon. The food is great, but it is still really slow. I went once on my birthday for breakfast and the food took over an hour. There were only 3 other tables there. I really like the family, and Elise, Mrs. Yanni, remembers me and asks about stuff we talked about last time I was there. Also, I once saw the daughter who cried through the episode help an obese person out of their chair when it was time to leave. She was so gracious and friendly about what could have been a very awkward situation. I gained a lot of respect for her in that moment. I like to support them, they are often quite empty. Gorgeous Georges just a few blocks north is probably better Mediterranean food. It is also not doing well. People just aren't going out to sit down Greek/Mediterranean in Finney Wood. Headhunters in Austin, Texas. My former roommate used to work there. It was the grungy bar you went to because your friend's punk or metal band was playing there, and that's it. Bar Rescue comes in and rips up the tiki decor and turns it into a steampunk place. People show up for the novelty for a little while, and then it drops back off. Mostly because the owner was a wit, and his books had more fiction than Barnes and Noble. He paid the staff cash under the table, and at least one person working there thought he was skimming their tips too. No matter how much money the place made or what they charged for drinks, he reported $2 a beer and $3 a mixed drink/liquor and made up a number for the take each night. He'd also try to bring in business like it was a sports bar, playing NFL games and big PPVs like UFC. Which got him busted. Apparently, cable companies don't like it when you use PPVs for commercial use without paying for those rights. When they showed up to fine him, TABC, Alcohol Licensing and Taxation in Texas, came along with him, took one look at his books, and, I heard, laughed in his face when he tried to pass them off. Afterward, business died since no one wanted to go near the place. I heard TABC would show up like the mafia collecting protection money for months, just walk in, open the register, and empty it to pay the fines and back taxes. And he kept cooking the books until TABC just yanked the license. Buildings up for lease last I saw. I live in Nottingham, UK, the home of The Curry Lounge, featured on Kitchen Nightmares UK. The place is still open today. Never been to Ramsay before, but I, along with a few friends and my dad, went in for a late-night curry after several pints too many. The decor was gorgeous, easily one of the nicest-looking restaurants I've ever eaten at. On the show, Ramsay slated them for using shop-bought jars of curry sauce and inspired the chef to cook traditional homemade curries. It paid off, to an extent, as the restaurant was packed with customers and the food tasted great. Although they did give me a lovely bout of chronic vomiting at 5 a.m. the following morning. My dad, with his astute judge of character, actually met and spoke to the owner, who he referred to as being a bit of a knob. Grace's place in Palm Coast, Florida was on Restaurant Impossible and is currently permanently closed. Before it ever became Grace's Place, it was under a different name and management entirely, and it was the best bagel in a town of transplanted New Yorkers. Originally, even though the product was good, I knew they weren't going to last. The owner got to talking with my parents, who had owned bagel stores up north, and offered to sell it to them. He even brought out accounting books to show them how good his numbers were doing. That was an obvious death knell for me. You don't try that hard to get out of a successful business. Apparently he did find some suckers though, and as soon as the name changed, the quality of the product went down. From the articles you can find, the new owners actually cited rat infestation and blamed it on the property management, but it was more than that. You could tell going in with the new owners that they didn't have the experience to make it work. The quality was down, the service was slower, and the prices went up. Sucks, because there is nowhere to get a decent bagel around here. Grasshopper, also in Carlstadt, New Jersey. It was an Irish-style pub more than a restaurant. At one point it was part of a family-owned chain that included other restaurants in northern NJ, Grasshopper, Grasshopper 2, Grasshopper also, and perhaps one other. I was surprised to see no reference to the other restaurants, so I figured it must have been sold to those owners. I'd been there several times and worked there for a while, not for them but for an entertainment company that did events there. This was a few years before the Kitchen Nightmares episode. But some of my friends hung out there at that time, and continue now in the new place. They never mentioned any problems and I ate there several times without incident. It was pretty much standard pub fare, not much better or worse than dozens of similar places in the area. I think it was probably bad management that couldn't contain costs rather than disgusting food. No one was going there for gourmet meals. One thing I remember complaining about when I ordered the grasshopper salad and couldn't find a single grasshopper or even a single cricket, but that was more a problem about poor naming choices on their part and unrealistic expectations on my part. I went to Mama Cherry's Soul Shack before and after Gordon had serviced it in Season 2, Episode 3 of the UK's Kitchen Nightmares. Before, it was amazing, as Gordon himself confirmed, because the issue with it wasn't the cooking but the management. She was just losing money left, right and center. She served like deep South American food which tasted absolutely amazing to me, although obviously you American readers far more exposed to this stuff might have had a different opinion. Anyway, to me, lovely stuff. Once Gordon had been thought weirdly it tasted a lot worse, I think because she was trying to claw that money back that she had lost. The food tasted really dialed in. They'd moved to a bigger premises too. The Soul Shack had really lost its soul, ironically enough. Sad to see that happen because it was amazing. Before it appeared on Kitchen Nightmares, I ate at the Mill Street Bistro in Norwalk, Ohio, which had an owner so contentious and dishonest that KN turned it into a two-part season finale. The atmosphere was relatively upscale, but the food was average at best and overpriced. It didn't surprise me to learn that farm-to-table claims were actually backed by frozen entrees. Since the show, the owner undid most of the changes Ramsay made, then shut it down, only to reopen as the Maple City Tavern. Yelp lists it as permanently closed, with a 1.5-star rating. Side note, the guy really has trouble with business names. First he called his place a bistro, a word that means nothing to 90% of our small-town Midwestern population. Then he reopened as a tavern, but stated that he wanted to be a family-friendly restaurant in local media. Who takes kids to a tavern? Visited an inn/restaurant in the southwest US that was on hotel hell. The owner fancied herself a great singer, basically Cher. So, she would belt out tunes in the restaurant whether you wanted it or not. The whole place was an expensive ego rub. Spoke to the server and the owner basically undid most of Gordon's suggestions. Food was bad. I ordered a chicken marsala that I had to send back because it had a layer of oil floating above the marsala sauce, pointed it out to the server and she looked at it and admitted, yeah, that's a lot of oil. Place eventually got sold. It was doomed, especially with a winery bistro with great food right across the street. Restaurant Impossible in Millersville, Maryland. Zadie's Grill, which was just an ill hole-in-the-wall restaurant in the worst possible area. Hidden behind an already obscure shopping center. Went there a few times before it was on the show and the half-pound burgers were fairly good. Went a couple times after the show aired and it honestly was a worse experience. I personally thought the food was worse. Also, the two women who were owners just didn't seem to care and were not friendly. Needless to say, it ended up shutting down not much later. Not surprising when they were in such a bad location. Their food could have been baller, but it wouldn't have mattered. No one could find that place. This wasn't Kitchen Nightmares. But I used to live in the building that LA Brew Company was in at Bar Rescue. The perfect example of people that have no business in the bar/rest industry. They made the money to start the business with their glass-making business or something. The space is absolutely beautiful and amazing. The food was completely inedible. Not even joking. As in not fit for human consumption. I tried 3 to 4 times in the 2 years. It was there because I'd be working from home and thought it would be easy. Ended up throwing it away every time. They ended up spending the most money on that episode, which was stupid. The rebuild was stupid and irresponsible. The owners were completely incompetent. I am glad they are gone. Not sure if the place that opened up after it is any good. But I don't know anyone in this area that has gone there. The stink the old owners created there have cursed the space. There are a few of those here in DTLA.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.